Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you are new here. I hope you're all doing so well. Welcome back to another true crime and makeup video. Today I am covering a very well known case, but this was requested via email, so I figured I would do it for you. Today we are covering the case of Edmund Kemper, also known as the coed killer. He is one insane, crazy, horrific, sadistic, evil man. So many other words that could be used to describe him, but I'll go with those. The things that he done to his poor victims is just unfathomable, and I can't believe that I'm actually going to have to talk about some of the stuff that I'm talking about today, but you guys asked for it, so I gave you it. If you do have any other case suggestions, you can leave them in the comments below, or you can send them via email to my email address up on screen now for you. All the information regarding products used in my face will also be down below with the links in case there's anything that you want to purchase. Social media handles are down below as well, my TikTok, my Instagram, but please make sure that you subscribe to my channel, put the notification bell on if you don't want to miss when I upload, which is 2 to 3 times per week, you know. It'll be worth it, I promise. But we have a lot to get through this evening, so I am just going to go right ahead and get on into the case of Edmund Kemper. So, Edmund Kemper was born on the 18th December 1948 in Burbank, California, and he was one of 3 children, but he was in fact the only son to Clarnell Kemper and Edmund Emil Kemper. Anytime I say or hear the name Edmund, all I can think is, was it not Narnia? One of the brothers was called Edmund, and was he not obsessed with Turkish Delight? They get caught off the Snow Queen because she was feeding him Turkish Delight or something? Or have I completely misremembered Narnia? But I swear, Turkish Delight played a part in this. Played a part in Narnia, not the Ed Kemper case. I mean, he might have liked it, but I don't know. So Edmund Kemper's father, Edmund Sr., I suppose, he was a World War II vet, and then after being a vet, he then went on to test nuclear weapons at Pacific Proving Grounds before moving back to California, when he then became an electrician. Now, Clarnell Kemper, the woman, she's not the nicest person. She was an alcoholic, so she really struggled, but apparently she also had borderline personality disorder. But all in all, she was really nasty, especially to Edmund Kemper, Jr. and Sr. She used to always make fun of Edmund Sr. because he was an electrician. Apparently this was just a menial job. But it was stated by a lot of people, including Ed Kemper, that his mum's behaviour was always very erratic. You never really knew what mood she was going to be in, how she was going to be feeling that day, and it was very much like walking on eggshells being in her presence. When talking about Clarnell at one point, Edmund Sr. had actually said that suicide missions in wartime and the later atomic bomb testing were nothing compared to living with Clarnell. He would take that any day over living with Clarnell. And Ed Kemper also stated that his mum would never really coddle him or show him too much love because she was scared, and I quote, by the way, that by giving him too much love and by coddling him would turn him gay. So she was honestly quite nasty to Edmund Kemper, really nasty actually, and all of this just because she didn't want to coddle him. But I think as time goes on, you kind of realise that the way that Clarnell felt about her son Edmund, I think stemmed a lot from how she felt about her husband. I think she felt like they were basically the same person. Ed Kemper expressed that he started having really dark thoughts and fantasies from a very young age, and he did in fact used to decapitate his sister's dolls, her Barbie dolls, and he said that he would get somewhat of a sexual thrill. He said that hearing the little pop of the head coming off and then holding the head up by the hair and then their bodies just sitting there would get him off. Kemper used to always make his sisters play really weird, disturbing games. One he called electric chair, and then the other one he would call the gas chamber. He would have his sisters march him to his death, and then when it was the electric chair, he would sit in a chair and then kind of writhe about as if he was being electrocuted, and in the gas chamber I think he just cough to death, basically. But very strange games. I can't say myself that I ever played that. At one point in time, Ed Kemper was also stalking his second grade teacher, and he was carrying his father's like bayonet, which I believe is like a big spear thing. I'll try and insert a photo in case I'm wrong, but he would carry that and stalk his second grade teacher, and his sister Susan used to make fun of him and be like,
well, why don't you just kiss her?
And Edmund would say,
if I wanted to kiss her, I'd have to kill her first.
Ed Kemper had stated that he was in fact very close with his father, and he was absolutely devastated when his father and his mother Clarnell separated in 1957. This meant that Ed Kemper Sr. ended up leaving the family home, leaving Ed with his two sisters and his mum, who practically hates him. And once Ed Sr. had left home, this is when Ed Kemper's behaviour really started to get out of control. So when he was the age of 10, he actually buried his cat alive. He later went back to where he had buried his cat, decapitated it, and put its poor head on a spike. And like, things like that break my heart. I've got two cats and they are my absolute world. Like, I could not imagine losing them, let alone losing them to something so awful. And when they were 13, they also had a family cat, which Ed Kemper murdered again because he thought it was favouring his younger sister. Like, what? Why? And once Ed had murdered the family cat, he actually kept pieces of the cat in his closet till his mum ended up finding it and of course went absolutely ballistic at him. It's also said that Ed Kemper had a couple of near-death experiences when he was a child. The first one was that his older sister tried to push him in front of a train. Like, that's not a game. Like, that is attempted murder. And another time she had actually pushed him in the deep end of a swimming pool when he couldn't swim, and he very nearly drowned. Now obviously, as we were saying, after the divorce happened between Ed Kemper's mother and his father, he was sent to live with his mother Clarnell in Helena, Montana, and she was neurotic, an alcoholic, she was abusive, she would constantly belittle Edmund Kemper, and she actually always kept him locked up in the basement because she feared that he would hurt his sisters, which, like, Clarnell, you're a bit crazy, but you're no far wrong. Clarnell would also mock Ed for his height because by the age of 15, Ed Kemper was 6'4". I was going to say 5'4", and I'm like, Anna babe, that's my height. But by the age of 15, 6'4", like, he was a big guy. But his mum would say that he was a real weirdo, that she reminds him of his dad, that no woman would ever love him. And then by the age of 14, Ed completely had enough of this. So he ran away to Van Nuys in California, which is where his dad was living. When he got to his dad's house, he found out that he had actually remarried and had a stepson. Like, he had this whole new family without Ed. Ed only stayed with his father very briefly because his father actually ended up sending him away to go and live with his grandparents, and this was in the foothills in Sierra Nevada. This was 2 miles west of a town called North Fork. I don't know why I always want to say Norfolk. Norfolk? I feel like there's maybe somewhere in the UK that's called like Norfolk. Norfolk? What? Ed did refer to his grandfather as senile and said that his grandmother was always emasculating both him and his grandfather, which is kind of the treatment that like Clarnell was giving him, so not exactly a better situation for him. On the 27th of August 1964, Ed was sitting at the table in the kitchen with his grandmother, Maud, and a big argument breaks out, right? They were always arguing, but this one was a huge argument. At this point in time, Ed is only 15 years old, but his grandfather had gifted him a hunting rifle to go like shooting birds and things like that. So after this big argument, Ed storms off, goes away to get his hunting rifle. He comes back through into the kitchen and Maud is like,
"Oh, I hope you're not going to shoot more birds."
And those would actually be Maud's very last words, because Ed continued to shoot Maud once in the head and twice in the back, ultimately causing her death. So now he's obviously shot his grandmother, and then he hears a car coming into the driveway, and it's his grandfather coming back from grocery shopping. And Apparently, in Ed's mind, he was like, I don't want my grandfather to see my grandmother lying dead. So the best resolution for this, in Ed's mind, was to go out into the driveway and shoot his grandfather dead as well. Yeah, that was Ed's version of problem solving, I guess, by killing him as well. At this point, Ed's really like panicking, like he's like, oh my god, like what have I done? What do I do now? And he ended up phoning Clarnell. Now, to be fair to Clarnell, I do think she gave him the only advice that she really could at this point, which was to phone the police and tell them exactly what he had done, which Ed did do, and then the police came and took him into custody. So when Ed had been arrested and taken into custody, when the police questioned him on why he killed his grandmother and his grandfather, Ed just said that he just wanted to know what it would be like to kill his grandmother. And then, as I've already said, he said that he didn't want his grandfather to find his grandmother dead, so felt it was best that he shot him too. Now, the crimes committed by Kemper at this point were deemed incomprehensible, and that there was no way that a 15-year-old who's stable could commit these crimes. So court psychiatrists had diagnosed Kemper with paranoid schizophrenia. And then on the back of the diagnosis received for Kemper, he was then sent to Atascadero State Hospital. And this is like a maximum security facility that houses mentally ill convicts. Now, when Kemper was in Atascadero, the psychiatrists there actually disagreed with the court psychiatrist's diagnosis. They believed that Ed had no sort of like interference with his thoughts, there was no like flight of ideas, any delusions or hallucinations, so they completely disagreed with the paranoid schizophrenia diagnosis. The psychiatrist at this hospital actually said that Ed was very intelligent, very introspective, and when they had measured his IQ, it came up at 136, which is actually 2 standard deviations above the average. So he was a really, really intelligent person. He knew what he was doing. So Kemper was then re-diagnosed because obviously this diagnosis doesn't work. So he actually was diagnosed with personality trait disturbance, aggressive type. Then in the future, they did retest his IQ, which came up at 145, which is crazy intelligent. I feel like it's very obvious because they always are, but Kemper was a model prisoner. He was actually trained by the staff to do the psychiatric tests and evaluations on the other inmates in the hospital, which is insane to me. Like, why would you have like a psychopath administer those tests? Doesn't seem right to me. They also deemed that Ed was a very good worker, which they said is very unusual for sociopaths. They were just really confused by him because I feel like he contradicted everything that he should have been, but he still was, but he wasn't acting like that, you know? They also said that Kemper had joined the JC chapter within the prison/hospital, which major red flag for me because John Wayne Gacy was a member of his local JCs and also the prison JCs as well, and that man was a terrible man. Now, it was said that during this time of being like a model prisoner that Ed Kemper had actually brought in his own test. I don't know it word for word, so I'm just going to read it because I do have it wrote down in front of me. So he claimed to develop a new test on the scales of Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, specifically on overt hostility scale. And Ed Kemper said that during his time in prison, because he was allowed to do these tests on other prisoners and he kind of learned how they worked, he said that he was definitely able to manipulate a lot of people, including his psychiatrist. Ed Kemper also stated that he learned a lot from the sex offenders that he was locked up with, like a lot of his ideas or things to do came from the sex offenders. So December the 18th, 1969 rolls around. Ed Kemper is now 21 and he is released from the psychiatric hospital. This was actually against the psychiatrist's recommendations. They didn't want him being released. Now, it was also against the psychiatrist's recommendations that Ed Kemper be released to his mother, Clarnell. You know, the woman who's a bit abusive, kind of belittles him, all of that jazz. But regardless, he was released to Clarnell, who had actually remarried, changed her name, then divorced again. Then by the 29th of September 1972, it was said that Ed had showed great rehabilitation and his juvenile records were completely expunged. Not a good idea, folks. Not a good idea. I'm just saying, not a good idea at all. He was not rehabilitated, he was just biding his time. And he never actually bided his time because he had already killed by this point. So in line with his parole regulations, Ed Kemper did attend college and he hoped to become a police officer one day. This was the passion that he had. So he did everything that he could and he did apply to be a police officer. But do you know, they actually have height restrictions on police officers, which I did not know. And Ed Kemper was turned away and rejected from the police because he stood at 6'9". Massive man, a massive man, but he stood at 6'9", and this was just too much. This was too tall, well above the police regulations. So unfortunately he was rejected, but he did remain friends with some of the police officers that he met during his time of, I don't know, going to interviews, something like that. And also, because of his size, they all referred to him as Big Ed, and he sort of called himself like a friendly nuisance, I think because he was still always around like the officers and things that he had hoped to work with. So yeah, he was deemed a friendly nuisance. It's also worth mentioning, because Ed had maintained like some relationships, friendships with the Santa Cruz police, he did often frequent the bar the Jury's Inn, which was a known kind of cop hangout. So he would go to the Jury's Inn and hang out with the officers. Also in line with his parole, Ed did work sort of like menial jobs, and this was before his employment with the State of California Division of Highways. And you know, just in case you're wondering about Ed's relationship with his mother since he moved back home, well, not good, very toxic, arguing all the time, still very much disliked each other, and nothing had changed. In fact, it only got worse. And then there was one point when Ed had actually moved out to live with a friend, but at this point his mum would just constantly phone him, or she would turn up like surprise visits, like, hello, here I am. Like, even though their relationship was so toxic, but it's like she still wanted to have a hold over him because he wasn't in the home anymore. Unfortunately for Kemper at this time, he would go through phases of financial difficulty, and this would result in him having to occasionally move back home and back in with his mum, to then move out again and live with his friend, and then go back home and live with his mum. So Ed went on to meet a student from Turlock High School near Santa Cruz Beach. Now, this girl was obviously a lot younger than Ed, and in 1973 they did wind up being engaged for a little bit of time. Now, the name of this girl, her parents requested that she not be named and that her name not be released, so we're not digging any further into that, we'll just leave it there. So at one point, Kemper was in a bit of like a car accident, you could say, and it wasn't his fault. And you know what happens if you've been in an accident that's not your fault? You're entitled to a claim. Where there's blame, there's a claim. So he ended up winning quite a lot of money in the settlement of this, because he did wind up quite badly injured, and he treated himself to a 1969 Ford Galaxy. Now, Kemper began to notice that there was groups of young women who would hitchhike quite often. So when he seen this group of young women, he was like, do you know what, I just need to be prepared for the unknown. So I'm going to put plastic bags, blankets and handcuffs in the back of my Ford Galaxy. You never know. Then Kemper started picking up these young girls, and to begin with, it was just a case of picking them up and then letting them go peacefully, like not actually attempting to do anything to them. He did say that he picked up around 150 women before he actually killed any of them. At the point of picking up the 150 women, Ed Kemper did say that at this point he wasn't really feeling that sort of urge to kill, that sexual urge to kill. And he said that at this time it was before he experienced his little like zappies, which were, I think, like his urges. And of course, this can only last so long before he would give in to those urges, and terrorise young women in California. Kemper would also state that the reason that he wanted to kill these young women was because they were apparently flaunting themselves in front of his face, and apparently they thought they could get away with any damn thing, and that society is already as screwed up as it is without this. So between May of 1972 and April of 1973, Kemper would go on to murder 8 young women. He would pick up hitchhiking young students, take them into isolated areas like within the woods, and he would either shoot, stab, smother or strangle these poor young women. Kemper would take the young women's bodies home and he would decapitate them and then perform irrumatio on their heads. And if you're not aware of what this is, I'll briefly tell you. So if you've heard of fellatio, that is the act of a woman putting it in her mouth. Irrumatio is when the male counterpart is thrusting into the mouth. It's a lot more like they're in control. After this, he would then have sex with the dead bodies, you know, the dead bodies that don't have heads, and he would then dismember them. During his 11-month murder spree, Kemper would kill 5 college students, 1 high school student, his own mother, and his mother's best friend. Kemper did also say that he would look for young women after he had had an argument with his mum. I think this is when he was like most fired up. And he would also get really angry at his mum because his mum was working at a university at the time and she just point blank refused to introduce him to anyone. And like rightfully so, I don't like Clarnell, but in this case I see it, I see what she means. It's also said that Kemper thought of these young women as surrogates for his ultimate target, which was his mum. His mum was the one that he wanted to kill. His mum was the one that he hated, but he was using all these young women to try and get his anger out. So on May the 7th, 1972, Kemper is driving through Berkeley, and it's at this point when he picks up 2 18-year-old students from Fresno State University. The students were Mary Ann Pesce and also Anita Lucchesa. Now, Kemper lured them in under the pretense that he would take them to Stanford University and drop them off. So they're in the car and Kemper's driving for about an hour at this point, and they haven't caught on that they're not going in the right direction, and of course Kemper's not told them that either. So he ends up driving them out to like a secluded wood area that he's very familiar with due to his nature of work, and he's actually worked near this area as well. So Kemper then handcuffs Mary Ann, and then Anita is tied up and thrown in the boot. He then proceeds to stab and strangle Mary Ann, and after that he would go on to do the very same to Anita. And like the really weird thing with Kemper is like he's so awkward and like gets embarrassed very easy. Like when he was handcuffing Mary Ann, he accidentally grazed like her boob or her breast, and he was like, oh whoops, sorry. Now Kemper did say that he really liked the kind of girls that he was picking up because in his mind, they seemed pretty like upper class, very classy, and he said that they weren't scroungy, messy, smelly, hippie-like girls, which that's his words by the way, no mine. I don't think like that, but that's how Kemper was thinking, as if he was sunshine and roses. Now, Kemper puts the bodies of Mary and Anita in the boot of his car, and he's driving back to the apartment. As he's driving back, he is pulled over by the police for a broken tail light. The police don't suspect a single thing. They just let him go. They don't check the car, nothing. They just let him off with it. So he just happily drives back to the apartment. When Kemper gets to the apartment with the bodies, he photographs them, he has sex with both of the bodies, he then dismembers them, and then he puts the body parts into a bag, and then he ditches the bagged body parts. And he was getting rid of the body parts at Loma Prieta Mountain, and if I've said that wrong, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. With the heads of the girls, he actually disposed of these in a ravine that wasn't too far away. Mary Ann Pesce's skull was found on the Loma Prieta Mountain, but none of the other remains were ever able to be found. Then on September the 14th, 1972, Kemper did pick up a 15-year-old dance student named Aika Koo. She was hitchhiking on her way to dance because she'd actually missed her bus. Now, he drove Aika into a really remote, secluded area as usual, and he did pull a gun on her, but he had accidentally locked himself out of the car somehow, and somehow he was able to leave the gun inside, and he was practically begging Aika to open the car door and let him back in. And this makes me so sad. Aika did let him back in the car. I don't know if she was thinking that maybe if she did this for him that he would let her go because she was showing kindness, but as soon as Kemper got back in the car, he choked her until she was unconscious, and then he raped her and killed her. After he had finished killing Aika, he put her in the trunk of his car and he drove to the Jury Inn bar for a drink. Yep, that bar where all his officer friends are, that bar. He drove there for a drink before taking the body back. And when he had actually came out of the bar, he opened the trunk of his car, so the boot of his car, that's what I would call it in the UK. So he opened the boot of his car and was just standing admiring her body before taking her body back to the apartment and doing the usual to the body before disposing of her remains. On January the 7th of 1973, Kemper was back living with his mum, and at this point he was driving around Cabrillo College campus. This is where Kemper would then pick up 18-year-old Cindy Ann Shaw. As he normally does, he drove poor Cindy into the woods and he shot her with a .22 caliber pistol before taking her back to his mother's house. Now, when he got back to his mum's house, his mum was actually in the house at this time, so he was able to get Cindy's body upstairs into his closet, and then he would wait until the next morning when his mother went to work. He would take Cindy's body out of the cupboard, he had sex with her body, removed the bullet from her corpse so it couldn't be traced to him. He then dismembered and decapitated the body in his mum's bathtub. Oh! Kemper actually held on to Cindy's head for a number of days, performing a rumatio on it whenever he wanted, and then he did go out to the back garden of his mother's house and he buried Cindy's head so it was facing up at his mum's window because he said that his mum always wanted people to look up to her. Oh my, he is the worst of the worst. Now, he did throw the remains off a cliff, but her head and her right hand could not be accounted for. The head, right, we know that's in the gut. What are you doing with the right hand? What are you doing with the right hand? Then on the 5th of February 1973, Kemper had just had another heated argument with his mum, so he decided, right, I need to go out and search for another victim instead of addressing my problems like a real adult. So he went out hunting for another victim, and of course, he's not known as the coed killer for no reason, but he is going out to search at campuses. However, the police at this point are very aware that there could be a serial killer on their hands, so they have warned young women in college campuses not to get in a car with anyone who doesn't have a college campus badge. Now, where does Kemper's mum work? A college. What would she have access to? A college campus badge for her car. What did Kemper steal? A college campus badge. Yeah. Now, because he has this college campus badge sticker thing on his car, he is able to pick up 2 girls this night, and he did encounter them separately. So at first, Kemper picked up 23-year-old Rosalind Thorpe. So Thorpe had got in and sat in the passenger seat, and she believed, obviously with the college sticker, that Ed Kemper was also a student at this uni. And then he was driving along and he seen what he described as a young Asian girl standing thumbing a ride, and this was Alice Liu. And Alice Liu was only 20 years old. So at this point, Rosalind is in the front passenger seat and Alice Liu is in the back seat. As they're driving for quite a long time, Kemper then begins to slow down the car and he turns to Rosalind Thorpe and shoots her. He then turned to Alice Liu, who was squirming in the back seat and cowering and covering her head and her face, etc. And he did actually shoot at her but missed her twice. However, unfortunately, the third bullet did hit her on the temple. So this time, Kemper had decided to decapitate both young girls in the back of his Ford Galaxy, and then he took their headless corpses into his mother's house, and he proceeded to have sex with them, dismember them. He did dispose of their remains the next morning, but before getting rid of the bodies, he did of course remove the bullets so they couldn't be traced, and then he proceeded to get rid of the remains. Some of the remains were found at Eden Canyon just a week later, but then some weren't actually found until March. So on April the 20th, 1973, Ed Kemper is awoken during the night, and it's the sound of his mum returning from a party. So she goes upstairs, gets into her bed, and she's reading a book when she sees Ed enter her bedroom. She turns around to Ed and says, "Oh,
I guess you're gonna want to stay up all night and talk now."
and Ed just says to her,
No, good night.
leaves the room and goes back to his room. However, Ed Kemper was just waiting on his mum falling asleep, so he would have the perfect opportunity to kill her. So once Ed is confident that his mum's asleep, he goes through into his mother's bedroom, he takes a claw hammer and bludgeons her to death. He then proceeds to slit her throat with a penknife. He then said that he beheaded her and then humiliated her corpse, so had sex with her corpse. And like this next bit, it's not funny, but like it kind of made me like a little bit, just because there is rumours, and they are just rumours, but there is rumours that Ed Kemper like put his mum's head on a shelf and just shouted at it for hours on end. Like, and I don't know why, but it kind of makes me think like that Criminal Minds episode when Gideon just goes into like this cabin or house or whatever and just starts like shouting to himself. I know he did it for good reason, but that's what I picture when I'm seeing Ed do this in an empty house to a head on a shelf. And apparently he also threw darts at her head and then cut out her tongue and larynx and put it into like the garbage disposal. However, the vocal cords would not like get mushed up in the garbage disposal, so the garbage disposal just spit it all back out. And Kemper literally said like something like seemed appropriate as much as she'd bitched and screamed and yelled at me over the years. So Kemper then hid his mum's corpse in his closet and then he went to a bar for a drink. I couldn't confirm if this was the Jury Inn, but like I'm assuming because this is where his friends would be, but who knows. Now, when Kemper got back from the bar, he actually invited his mum's best friend over for dinner and a couple of drinks. Her name was Sarah Taylor Hallett, but she was better known as Sally, so I'm going to refer to her as Sally. Now, with Sally, Kemper had strangled her and then hidden her in his closet as well, and outwardly there didn't seem to be any disturbance, but Kemper had left a note for the police. Now, I do have wrote down what he said on this note just to get it word for word. So he said, approximately 5:15 a.m. Saturday, no need for her to suffer anymore at the hands of this horrible murderous butcher. It was quick, asleep, the way I wanted it, not sloppy and incomplete, gents. Just a lack of time, I got things to do. Just a lack of time, I got things to do? Like what? Like what? Like where are you going? So Kemper, as we know, had fled the scene and he did drive non-stop to Pueblo, Colorado. And he said he took a ton of caffeine pills to keep him awake because this drive was 1,000 miles. So Kemper left with 3 guns and hundreds of rounds of like ammunition. He believed that he was the target of like this huge manhunt. But when he got to Pueblo, Colorado, he realised that like nothing had even been on the radio. Like, had they even found his mum? Did they even know that he is a fugitive on the run? Like, I think he was a bit annoyed, to be honest. So he makes a phone call to the police and he confessed to the murders of his mum and also of Sally. But the police never believed him. The police had actually said to him, like, I'll just call back later. And Kemper's a bit like, huh? Call back later. So he actually waits a couple of hours and then he phones them back and he asks to speak to one of the guys that he knows. Do you know, like one of those ones that he was quite friendly with? So he gets him on the phone and he confessed to this and the officer made sure that they got police in the way and then he was taken into custody. On May the 7th, 1973, Kemper was indicted on 8 counts of first-degree murder. Now, due to the explicit confession that Kemper had given, and because it was so detailed, counsel's only option for Kemper was to plead not guilty by reason of insanity. And like, he is pretty much insane, right? But he also knows what he's doing. And it is said that Kemper actually tried to commit suicide twice whilst in custody, but the trial ended up going ahead in October 1973. 3 court-appointed psychiatrists did find Kemper legally sane, and Dr. Joe Fort interviewed Kemper multiple times, including one occasion under truth serum, which is basically this like concoction that apparently makes you tell the truth, basically. Now, Dr. Fort relayed to the court that Kemper was involved within cannibalism. He was partaking in that. Apparently he was slicing flesh from his victim's legs and then cooking it into a casserole and consuming it. Kemper was also deemed fully cognizant, and apparently he really enjoyed the thought of infamy and being remembered as a murderer. Now, something called the McNaughton standard was used, and I'm going to read word for word what that is because I wasn't entirely sure, so just in case you're not aware. So the McNaughton standard means establish a defence on the ground of insanity. It must be clearly proved that at the time of committing the crime, the party accused was labouring under such of a defect of reason from disease of the mind and not to know the nature and quality of the act that he was doing, or if he did know it, that he did not know what he was doing is wrong. But with this, it was very obvious that Kemper knew exactly what he was doing, and he knew that what he was doing was wrong, and there was obviously severe signs of malice aforethought. November the 1st, Kemper takes a stand for himself and wants to testify in his own defence. So Kemper said that the reason that he killed these victims was because he wanted to keep them for himself, like little possessions. And apparently he was trying really hard to convince the jury and the people of the court that he was insane. And he pulled a John Wayne Gacy. He said that his body was being inhabited by 2 beings. One of these beings was the killer personality. Not like, oh my god, he's got a killer personality, but like a killer personality. Not the good one, an actual killer's personality. You get it, I'm sure you get it. And of course, he said that when he was murdering people, that he completely blanked out. He didn't know what he was doing because it was this other being inhabiting him. Then on November the 6th, 1973, a 6-man and 6-woman jury deliberated for 5 hours and they deemed that Kemper was sane. They found him guilty on all counts of murder. Now, Kemper apparently really wanted the death penalty and he said that he would accept death by torture. However, with a moratorium placed on capital punishment by the Supreme Court of California, this meant that the death penalty couldn't be invoked. So Kemper obviously was charged on all counts of murder and he received 7 to life for each individual count. And he was sentenced to a California facility. It was a medical facility for like the criminally insane, and this was in Vacaville. Now, crazily enough, Ed Kemper was actually incarcerated with some of like the most notorious killers of all time. So he was incarcerated alongside Herbert Mullen and Charles Manson. And he did say that he didn't like Mullen very much. He said he was a man that killed around the same time and same area as Ed. But according to Kemper, he killed with no good reason. Ed Kemper also said that Mullen was like a foot shorter than him, so he really enjoyed intimidating Mullen. Then at one point, like Mullen really liked to sing and apparently he would do it whilst the other inmates were watching TV. So when he'd done this, Ed Kemper took a glass of water and threw it over Mullen and told him to shut up. And then after that point onwards, Mullen ended up asking for Ed's permission for him to sing. And Ed had basically said this was him performing behaviour modification treatment. Now, Ed Kemper still remains in general population to this day, and apparently he is still being the model prisoner that he showed back in the day. Like, he schedules prisoners' appointments, he coordinates prison programmes, like he's so heavily involved. And Kemper has actually narrated over 5,000 hours worth of audiobooks for a charity for the visually impaired. Could you imagine being visually impaired and then finding out that Ed Kemper is is narrating your audiobook. Like, I hope people checked what he was saying in these audiobooks and that it's actually the story and not his own sick thoughts. Kemper did suffer a stroke in 2015 and then was declared medically disabled, and the whole time that he has been in prison, his parole has been denied 9 times, and he actually waived his right to a parole hearing 4 times, and the next time that he is up for a parole hearing is July 2024. This year. This year, Ed Kemper could roam our streets, but people believe that Ed Kemper is not going to get out and they're just like humouring him by giving the parole hearing. I think it's pretty common that after a certain amount of time, like murderers and lifers basically get this parole hearing, but there's no guarantee that he's going to get out. But that is it for today's case of Edmund Kemper. I really hope you enjoyed it and found it somewhat interesting. Enjoyed's always the wrong word to use, but I always forget what else to say, but I do hope you find it interesting. If you like the makeup that I done today, all the products will be listed down below in the description for you. My social medias will be down below as well if you want to give them a follow, so that will be my TikTok and my Instagram. But ultimately the important thing is subscribing to my channel and maybe putting the notification bell on if you don't want to miss when I upload, because I do upload 2 to 3 times per week, each time with a new true crime case, so if you don't, you're missing out. Also leave down below any case suggestions that you have, or you can send them over to my email, which I will pop up on the screen now for you in case you don't want to leave it in the comments down below. But I really hope you enjoyed this, and until next time, I'll see you later. Bye!